Hello everyone, MasterZan1001 here, and in this video we'll be going over some of the changes that have happened between Boxcutter 717.14 and the latest update, Boxcutter 717.15. The main theme has been performance and improving its usability in general, but definitely performance in general. Over the course of the last couple of Blenders, things have changed that have kind of hit us in the speed department, and as users, we're hypersensitive to changes in the speed and the ether, so we have done everything in our power to try to make Boxcutter as fast as possible, and there's definitely some noticeable speed improvements that should be felt in this version, especially compared to previous versions, and we'll continue to optimize and make this thing as fast as possible as we continue to work. But without further ado, let's go over some of the things that are new to this version and what you can expect in this latest update to Boxcutter. So today we're using 717.13 and we're actually in 2.93, so we're using the version before today's latest update to talk about Inset. So I'm just going to delete the cube, Shift A, and we're going to insert a cylinder, and we'll first sharpen it just to make things easier, and I'm going to select a circle and we'll turn on snap dots so that way I can just jump off this central point, and we'll press I to jump to Inset. And notice that the moment I begin extruding, that the performance just begins getting so out of control, insanely slow, that it's almost unable to be explained. And this is something that a few astute users had reported to us, and we've been looking into it, and I'm happy to announce it has finally been resolved. In fact, looking at it, I can see how this is just completely unacceptable and was something that we need to get rectified rather quickly. So we'll minimize this where we're in the current version of Boxcutter 717.14, and if we delete our cube and insert our cylinder, we can just do the same thing, sharpen it, select a circle, and we will just press I to switch to Inset, and now we see that everything is performing the way it's supposed to. In fact, I can press T and begin insetting it once again, click to apply. We can even jump off this point, press I again, and begin insetting it even more. So now I'm just happy to announce that Inset is performing the way it's supposed to, so users can get in and inset to their heart's content. Of course, inset rules apply, so you must be wary, of course, when you have your thickness too big. You'll have some issues when it comes to dealing with its edges. In fact, you can see a little artifacting happening, but the good thing about this is since our cylinder is the same resolution as what we use, we can just go under Add Modifier, add a well, scroll a little bit, and now we have a shape that's perfectly ready for us to add a bevel onto without any further issue. So as we discussed in the previous example, Inset has been improved for this version. However, it also opens the door for a new feature called Inset Slice. So to show it in action, I'll just jump over to Circle and we'll press X a couple of times to change this into an intersect box. And before we actually do a Inset Slice, I just want to talk about it in regards of its comparison with something like Recut. Right here I have a slice set up, I'm paused. And in order to perform a recut, I can press Alt X and it will actually slice and give me back the original mesh that I had instead of the mesh that we have made via all these operations. So by clicking, this operation has now been complete. I can press D, switch over to Ngon, and just begin cutting and mirroring. However, I don't want to use bisect mod. I want to press X on mirror in order to reset it, and we'll just set this back to its defaults and mirror this below this one. So that is how Recut works. Inset is a little bit of the same. Just like in previous videos where I talk about how Inset is a tool that has much more rules than some of the other tools inside of Boxcutter. First you start off setting up your Inset, and then using the exact same hotkey that you use with Inset. With Recut, Alt X, you're able to change a inset into a slice, and by pressing spacebar we've applied the operation, and we can see that we've now sliced out a piece of this surface, and this can lead to some really interesting results, especially when you get in and begin working some planes into it, as you see me doing here, where I'm able to just begin working on just the slice itself and get some rather interesting results. In fact, we'll use a circle here and just cut into this and begin creating some rather interesting shapes. Of course, I can extend this along, select both of these, perform a difference. However, it doesn't appear to have shown up. So let's change this over to fast again, but we want to make sure that's actually mirrored across, and that suffices. So I will just shift click solid wire in order to turn this into a solid mesh, and this is our result so far. So there's some really interesting results that can be had just playing around with Inset Slice. But to just give a recap of it, just pressing Alt X during Inset instead of giving Recut, which was something that we never used or talked about, it will now give you an Inset Slice, which is something that I feel will be a lot more useful to users. But just like that, we're able to really quickly get in here and just create a nice little reactor. But before moving on to the next slide, just to show it again in action. So I'll press H in order to transition this into a wire shaded object. And if we press I, we can turn this into an inset. And by pressing Alt X, we can get our slice back. And this works on a myriad of shapes that normally wouldn't work. For example, something like this is something which is the reason that Inset exists, is to be able to create these sort of form cuts that actually contour to the surface, unlike Box, which just cuts into it like you see here. So just pressing Alt X, we're able to get this piece, and then we see that we're not able to move it. And this is where Uniqueify comes in. We've worked hard on making Uniqueify as useful as possible, for making it easier and easier for users to be able to dislodge things and make them unique and give them their own systems and behaviors without them being interfered with by their main shapes that may share some of the same shapes due to efficiency. In fact, now we're able to go in and give this an even thinner slice and just begin cutting away on this, even though it was previously connected to this area. In fact, we can even bring this piece back and give it more or less step just to, you know, be weird with it. We can press Alt G, put it back, but now we have this little slice sitting on top that's perfectly contoured to the surface that we can begin just shaping to our heart's desire. So here I am in an older version of Blender using an older version of Boxcutter just to show a bug in action. We'll press D and switch over to circle. And someone sent me an email saying, hey, you know, if you create a shape using a triangle, when you apply it, it will rotate randomly. And this was a bit of a head scratcher. It seemed such a strange issue to not notice. However, I'm glad to announce that that issue has been resolved. So here we are drawing our shape. We'll set it to 3, click, and it's perfectly fine. However, this goes into an even deeper discussion. Whenever it comes to our modifiers, we have this option called Keep Modifiers, and Keep Screw is a really interesting one. Some work has actually went into Keep Screw, where if it's for users who want to keep the screw modifier used for circles alive in order to create dynamic circles. So right now I have it enabled. We'll just create a circle, press Ctrl D, set it to 32 rounds, and we'll shift it to live. And if we tap into edit mode, we see that this is still alive as a screw modifier, and we can actually get in and shape it, which is really interesting. This allows for some really unique results. However, it also is more prone to strange things like being unable to tell which direction is the proper way for normals. So we'll just draw some circles for a moment and just play the gambit of seeing how many of these circles actually work out the way they're supposed to. Right now I have my shift behavior set to taper, so anytime I'm drawing I could just press shift, hold it, and move the mouse in order to just taper a circle. And with that we could press Alt V, look at our face orientation, and almost every shape looks right except for this one with the bevel in it. So let's test that out. Let's draw a shape, let's bevel it, click and apply, and we see that that actually causes the normals to have a differentiation. By default in Boxcutter, Keep Modifiers with Screw is off, which means that whenever you draw a shape, it is just a circle. It's been cleaned up. So if we were to ever scroll, bring this back, we could see that there's no inner geometry here. There's no screw modifier. The only modifier that's live on this is the bevel modifier. So whenever it comes to something like this, you do want to be aware that if your normals are flipped, you can spot it in face orientation mode as I'm showing, and then you could even go in and actually flip it on the modifier level. Like I'll use Hops tool to bring back this cutter, and we'll go under normals, just choose to flip, and now we're back in business with all of our normals being correct. And you might be wondering, why even bother? You know, what happens if your normals are incorrect? Well, right now we're in face orientation mode. You can see that the normals are flipped here, but we'll press Alt V and just turn it off and just pretend like we're just working without knowing, and we're just going to press Q and control click bevel, and we see that everything else bevels the way it would be expected, except for one area just looking absolutely atrocious. So let's Alt click sharpen to put away at normal, and everything else looks pretty much as you would expect, except for this one area that doesn't actually look correct at all, and that's because the normals are flipped, which is causing basically a reverse bevel situation to happen here. And usually if we want that to happen, we do it to the cutter, not to the object itself, via flipping the normals. So whenever that happens, you can just go in and flip the normals for that. But that's just something to keep in mind in the event that you're wanting to draw using non-destructive circles. However, I personally recommend having keep screw off. You'll live a lot longer. I mean, I usually just go in, cut circles as needed, and then if I need to, say, up-res a circle, we can press Control D, and let's put in, say, an 8-round circle. So this circle is obviously too low. So let's go in and sharpen it, and we see that it's been sharpened. And we could actually Alt-click subdivision, which will put a subdivision first, and we see that the circle is now rounder because it's been subdivided. In fact, I didn't even need to Alt-click it because it's the only modifier in the stack. But if there were multiple modifiers, I would probably want this to be first, just so it gets a nice shading job. Unless it's beveling on a weight group or vertex group, then you probably want to double check your modifier order. But just showing some ways that circle can be approached and how we've attempted to improve it for this version, as well as a small bug that I'm happy a user reported to us before we got this update out the door. In this latest update of Boxcutter, you'll also be able to press F4, bring up your preferences, and under the Boxcutter preferences in the color section, you'll be able to specify what color your cutter collection will be. So in this case, we'll specify it to be orange, which means that the moment our collection is created, it'll now be the color orange. So that was just something I was wanting personally, and I'm glad to see that it finally made it into this update, meaning that both Hops and Boxcutter are capable now of having custom collection colors on the fly and support it in Blender versions that actually support custom collection coloring. Typically, whenever you draw a shape, the shader just draws it like so, unless you press H and it's back to being solid and it looks like this. However, if you press L, it looks like this, which means that you're currently in a live drawing state. This means that anytime you draw a shape, the shape will be kept live and auto hide will be disabled, allowing the shapes to remain on screen as you see here. This is just a state you can toggle into with L, and you can toggle out of it easily by also pressing L, which means on your next cut, cutters will be hidden again. However, now, if you're using a box cutter, and you hold shift to live, you can see that now the box will also shift into the live color to let you know that whenever you left click, you are going to shift into live, basically keeping that shape. So to show it again, just pressing shift, it highlights, letting you know that you're about to shift into live. This is one of my favorite new features of Boxcutter. Glad to see it now a thing. So in closing, I'm equally as proud of Boxcutter as I am of Hops in its current state. A lot of work has gone into making it as fast as possible, and we continue to pour over the code to see if there's any opportunities to make Boxcutter even better. However, it is always a struggle of us and time and Blender and changes that happen there, and us trying to keep up with the times. However, I'm always proud of these tools remaining in a functional state. You know, they've been around for quite a while, and the downtime on them has always remained fairly minimal. But our work, of course, continues. Anytime we get things stable, that's when I see that the coast is clear for us to begin on the expansion route, because there is much work, of course, to be done. However, Inset Slice was something that was on the whiteboard for the longest that I wanted, and I knew that I wanted, and so I'm glad to see it finally take place. In fact, I'm not sure how many people actually gave it a try, but it's actually quite easy to get acquainted with it. It plays by the same rules as Inset, so if you're familiar with Inset and how to get it to play right, it's just as much fun to play with Inset Slice. So just get in there and give it a try. So we'll just lower our smoothing here. But sphericals is one of my favorite tool tests. Like I said in the HardOps video, these aren't supposed to be struggles or things that, you know, you need to spend a whole lot of time practicing and studying. I mean, that's probably weird to hear from me, but you know, really it is a tool test. You get in and you do these to just kind of pop your knuckles and see if you have, you know, your wits about you for getting more serious with hops workflows. But a sphere is a nice control study of dealing with curves and straight edges all in the same type of workflow. So here I'm in Linebox. I almost forgot I was in Linebox for a moment. So much work has went into Linebox that I never get to talk about. However, its day will come. Local rotation support was the big obstacle to overcome for it. So I'm quite proud of it in the state that it is at this time. In fact, once something stops getting a ton of updates for it, that means that, you know, it's finally hit that spot. But a lot of the work that's gone into Boxcutter this update was to kind of clear the stage for some future plans that are coming up, hopefully very soon. But, you know, we'll see whenever it gets here. But definitely wanted to have the stage set as far as Boxcutter was concerned. Anytime I hear messages from users about performance issues, you know, it's definitely heartbreaking. I mean, I expect it's not going to work the best on a Macintosh or a i3 or an i5 or grandpa's old computer or a Pentium 4. But when people are saying that they're, you know, using Threadrippers, sarcastic jokes aside, and it's having performance issues, but those are things we definitely want to get to the bottom of and try to rectify. So that was kind of the theme of the last two updates. The last update should definitely feel a lot faster than _13 did, but we're always on the lookout for additional ways we can optimize things with it. In fact, I'm always contemplating how we can get 3D Array to its fully perfect state so we can finally bring it over to Boxcutter. Also, I've always wanted to replace apply slices in Boxcutter with smart apply from HardOps. So just as you do slices, it just smart applies it, but we'll have to see. There's always something additional to do, but I feel that as we get this stuff that I refer to as tech more and more refined internally, that we're able to begin splitting it across the multiple tools. I mean, there was a time when it was in the plans to try to get snapping over into KitOps, and while we're not doing that at this moment, that doesn't mean that such dreams are to be forgotten. So we're just lowering our inset till we get something, and they're really not cutting us a lot of slack here. In fact, they cut us that much slack, and I'm just wondering, should I even play along with that? And the answer is yes. I could actually disable some booleans on the other mesh, and that would get us a lot farther. But we're just trying to just create a quick little spherical, have some fun with Boxcutter just at the end of this video. In fact, I'm looking at the clock at the top of the screen, so I'm trying to be a little time efficient here. I saw a few complaints in my last videos about them being too long, so I still think that they don't get the point here, but that's fine. Updates could always be consolidated to just be little black tags of update log notes, but I always find it fun to go over them in a video format to show you guys kind of how far things have come in, especially comparing them to previous versions where things are less than adequate. In fact, this most recent update of us comparing it just against the most recent update is you know, humorous to me, because usually we compare it against like 5 versions back, you know, a real punching bag. But now we're leaping over versions that we had just put out, and that's always great to see. So we will just slide this over just to give us something on the shading side, and just working some kind of latches in here. We're still in view align, so might as well take advantage of that. So when it comes to these sphericals, one of my favorite things to do is actually slice off an area really narrow in the round meaty part, and then come back with a box and work our way down. Another thing I really love about Boxcutter is being able to press Alt-Z to turn off wireframe see-through mode. There was like 50 versions in which we couldn't do that, and it just drove me nuts. I knew that it needed to be a thing. I'm so glad we didn't use Alt-C for something else that we weren't supposed to. Let's bring this forward. So we'll just put a curve here, press Q, and adjust our curve. There's a Q menu for almost everything, but definitely everything that matters. However, there's still a few Q menus I feel are left to be done. And there's still a whole troubleshooting arc with hops that I mean to pursue. So there's still so much to be done before the end. I want this tool capable of helping people get forward, but I also want it capable of showing people the whys and wheres of the issues that they create themselves and try to educate them on how they can best resolve it. So I always think back on some of the troubleshooters of the past, like the Windows XP troubleshooter. Not saying that it's better. There I did a symmetry when I meant to do a modifier mirror. We can't do that, so we'll just undo and fix that. And this is our spherical for this particular demo, except we want to keep going with it, right? So for this we have to convert it to a mesh because we don't have a smart apply duplicate for curves yet. But if we did, then you would see me smart apply duplicate this area from a curve and then go through these operations that you see me doing here. But we're just trying to put a little bevel on it, and we can select that, select this, mirror it to the other side. It's fine. And this is our spherical so far. So I will just select everything and we will just control click blank material. And I was about to actually wrap up the video here looking at the timer. You guys are terrible making me have to look at the time like this, but whatever. We'll just press X and just perform a cut. And keep in mind, I'm also uploading videos all the time to the second channel, Boxcutter. So be sure to check that out as well if you begin to miss me. We'll assign a blank material here as well. And, you know, looking at this from the top, I actually want to grab this and perform a cut here, except I want to press G. One of the things I discuss a lot internally is, why is G slow? I mean, I get it, but why is G slow? I mean, I got this idea for a kind of smart pause mode, because I always try to tell people about pause and people ain't trying to hear it. They're like, why are you telling me to use pause? Why? Because it's a thing and you use it when your computer gets slow. You should just use pause mode. That's why it was made. It was made to allow you to keep working in case things get slow. But people don't like that solution, so I feel that there's a kind of hybrid smart pause mode that could work, that's like semi-live, semi-pause, and it would be assistive towards working fast, but also working in a kind of staggered state to try to make it easier to work. So I'm just going to press Alt-VV, and we're just going to jump through some environments. We'll press V to turn off the background until we get it right where we want it, and I'll press Alt-V plus B, and we'll just scroll through some lights till we get some lights just the way we want. And I'm over the 10-minute mark, so with that we will just end this video, and thank you for watching. I'll see you guys next time.